Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Tom Sheahen, MIT educated physicist, author of Everywhere, God, Symmetry, and Time. He focuses on how science and faith, science and faith are compatible. So we'll be talking about, how modern physics from the Big Bang to evolution supports a deeper, more expansive understanding of the divine and much more. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Tom. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about reconciling faith and science. So we'll talk about this and much more. But before that, let's talk a bit about your background, your journey, so that people know who they are listening to.
Okay, well, I went to MIT, both undergraduate and graduate, majored in physics. And I've had a career in physics research, mostly pertaining to energy sciences. And those span everything from the familiar fossil fuels through nuclear power, through wind and solar and so forth. Conservation of energy has been a key feature within my work of not using energy foolishly or not wasting it. So within my career, I've accomplished a fair amount, had some publications and so forth. But honestly, what I really like best of what I've done is what's in this book, God, Everywhere, God, Symmetry, and Time, which is I didn't get paid for doing this, but it was certainly an important part of my life and my learning throughout my life. So the work in physics that I've done is, again, focused on energy sciences, but the work in the intellectual and spiritual world is, I think, represented in this book.
Absolutely. So we'll come to the book also separately, Tom. But first, we want to understand from you, when you say that, that science and faith are compatible, I want to understand, why do we even have to say that? Isn't it very much understood? Where is the discord? And who is the reason, or what is the reason for discord that we have to, you have to make an effort to say this to the world?
Indeed. This may be a more local or Western problem than it is in the Eastern hemisphere. At least where I live in America, many young people brought up in a church, often Christian church, but also Jewish and Islam and so forth, upon reaching their teenage years, somehow get the impression that if you're going to be a scientist, you have to abandon your religious faith. And I'm here to say that's a terrible mistake, and it's not true at all. Because while there are people who will make wisecracks and hostile remarks against religion and against particular religions or elements of this or that religion, the fact of the matter is that the connection between faith and science is actually a very favorable one. What we have, if you look carefully into science and carefully into religious faith, you find that they are compatible, that they are partners, that they take you together and in a unified way towards a better understanding and greater knowledge. Regrettably, too many of our young people who become adults have missed that, and they are not paying attention to that basic truth, but rather have been drifted off by television and so forth into thinking the secular world is the only thing there is, and so they abandon religious faith. And I really would like to discourage that absence. That is, I'd like to encourage them to stay with faith, but understand it at a more deep level and understand how it does connect with science.
Absolutely. So, to understand it better, Tom, who is opposed to it? I ask this. Let's look at it from, is physics opposed to faith, and or from the science point of view? Is it chemistry? Is it
No, that
biology? Is it medical science?
exactly. There's no opposition when you really dig in deep. Okay. You will find, for example, there's a famous atheist who gets way too much television time named Richard Dawkins in England. And he gets on television and is bashing religion and every time he's on. But he doesn't understand the real linkage between science and faith. And therefore, he's just incorrect. But he does get a lot of television time. So the people who don't get the television time, but who are quietly studying the depths of science, they're the ones who have a much better understanding of faith. And happily, it has been the case that within the last quarter century, the number of medical people and scientists who have become open in their belief in God instead of hiding it in the 20th century. We now have statistical numbers about how people are embracing faith in large numbers, like greater than 70% of scientists and medical people do believe in God, if not a particular religion, that at least in a something higher spiritual, compared to the early 20th century when atheism was much stronger. So it's getting better.
Absolutely, Tom. So, what is it that you want to tell the world? How should they understand faith? How should they understand science? How should they understand God? Are these, because they might themselves sometimes confuse. Others are vested interests also. Some want television time, so they have their own agenda. But is faith, is science, is God at the mercy of just thinking of a few people? Or is it much more bigger than that? Why should it be at mercy of the thoughts of a few people?
Okay, the biggest thing that I think almost all humans have missed, and it's in the nature of being a human, is the relationship between God and time. It is widely assumed by human beings that God exists within time, but that is a huge mistake. In fact, God is the creator of time. God created space and time together. We know it under the label the Big Bang. God's creation of time gives him a completely unique position. He is present to all time, whether it's the past, the ancient days of long ago, or yesterday, or today, or tomorrow, or the distant future. God is simply present to these things. Mankind, on the other hand, lives in a realm in which time passes linearly from day to day. We cannot comprehend why and how God can possibly be present to all time. So this creates a terrible weakness on our part. But I do want to emphasize that it's a weakness of humans and it's not something wrong with God. God is present to all time. The title of my book, Every When, which is a brand new word, it's parallel to everywhere. We understand what everywhere means, but no one can understand what every when means because we humans are incapable of comprehending all time at once. And I'm drawing attention to that distinction because it's the source of all kinds of mistakes. Many people think God is within time, God is subject to time, God is inferior to time. And one of the first things in the Bible so long ago, the very first commandment begins, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Well, thinking that time is there and God is within time is putting the false God of time before God. Gigantic mistake, huge mistake. But it is the mistake that humans just naturally make because of the human limitation. So I'm drawing attention to this. I can't fix the problem. I'm a human too. But I want people to know that there is this dichotomy between humans and God, and that the way God comprehends time is completely different from what we limited humans are stuck with.
Absolutely. Do you think it is human beings are still evolving? Science is evolving. Do you think we have the wherewithal to even judge God in that sense and try to make an absolute remark about his existence the way, because we have been made in his image in a perfect way. We haven't been able to even understand ourselves better. That is why people say you need to go inward. So, should that be even a point of discussion when we are we even capable of judging God from the way we are evolving as we are making perhaps better understanding of things. Even physics is still looking for God particle and so many things all related to God. And many people talk about going inward. Amidst all these things, how right it is to judge something which is too much beyond us. Time is also something which is for us, our creation, our understanding, the way we can relate to things in the way we have been made as human beings. Beyond that, we do not know. We are trying to understand things beyond our solar system, other solar systems, and beyond this. Help us understand the dilemma of a common person. How should they understand amidst all this misinformation, disinformation, and information toxication, if I can use that word.
Yes, the collection of problems that humans face is very great. We are limited, and if we realize that we're limited, then we don't try to judge God or to fit God into some category. Trying to get God inside a human brain is a futile task and error, but there have been many attempts to do that. Just one of them I'll touch on briefly is you mentioned the word the God particle. That began as a wisecrack by a physicist named Leon Lederman, in that he said that if we call it a God particle, our book will sell more copies. The idea that got caught on was just shameful. I mean, it's something that the media does. It got on board of it and thought it was a cute thing. But our young people are thinking that, oh, gee, God's just some kind of a particle. Well, that's, incredibly stupid. But falling for myths and being sucked in by popular culture is a very common human failing. So what I want to say is that when you study science in depth, you become awestruck by the beauty of science. And that beauty, that magnificence, the symmetry of science just leads one to think not just who discovered this, like Newton or Einstein, but who thought this up? Where did this magnificent, incredible beauty and elegance of science come from? And the answer is God invented it. We have the Christian creed begins, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible. All right. Other creeds of other faiths around the world may express the very same idea in different words, but the fact is that God is the creator of all things visible and invisible. Well, what is the visible? Well, what you see around you, certainly things. Also, the visible encompasses what we can achieve with scientific instruments, the microscope, telescope, and so forth. And the very best telescope right now is the James Webb telescope out in space. The Hubble telescope is also out there. And they look very, very far away and very far into the past. But all that's part of the visible because we've achieved that. But what's the invisible that God created? Well, as a physicist, I'll mention quantum mechanics. I'll mention general relativity. These things are invisible, but they're real, and God created them. Now, Einstein discovered general relativity. Good. But discovering it and creating it are two entirely different things. And what we as human beings have to be humble enough to realize is that God created the invisible things that make our world, our lives extremely good. And that's his accomplishment. We are people who watch, we are spectators, we strive to understand.
Absolutely, absolutely, Tom. Let's understand more through your book, Everywhere God, Symmetry, and Time. Who is this book for?
Well, okay, I'll hold it up here for a moment. You see the cover, but
Yes, yes.
the the book is designed for people who are questioning, really, people who wonder about the why science is publicly pushed as some kind of supreme thing when in fact science is something invented by God and is subordinate to God, but science can lead us to God. That's what's important. That's why I say faith and science are partners on the pathway towards greater understanding. The things that are there in science point very clearly in the direction of God, the creator. Among physicists, there's always a big question: why is there something instead of nothing? It's a puzzle within physics. Physics cannot answer that question, but it's on the mind of physicists. Well, the reason, in my view, is because God wanted to create a being, a creature, that was capable of loving God in return. That is a very, very good reason to create all that we see, all that we experience. Well, how did God do that creation? The mechanism he used is the large theory we call evolution. Starting with very simple symmetry and particles, we eventually got atomic nuclei, atoms, molecules, on and on, stars, galaxies, and so forth, a planet, and life formed on this planet, living being, plants, animals, fungus, stuff like that, very elementary life forms. And all this continued through higher and higher life forms. And the highest life form we know is us, humans. Now, did God have to do all this sequentially? Well, he let the evolution run sequentially, but he was present to all time. And if it took 3 cycles of stars exploding and so forth, and new gas and dust forming new stars, new planets, new galaxies, the whole works, and it took 14 billion years, it doesn't matter, because when you're present to all time, you're here today just as much as you were at the very beginning of time and space. And again, humans cannot comprehend that. It's really over our heads. It's beyond us. But God can do it, and God did do it, and God created the universe, including life, mankind, all because he wanted to find this creature capable of loving God in return. And we are capable of doing that.
Absolutely. So God had a purpose. What is a human being's purpose of existence, which a lot of people are trying to understand and find out for themselves individually, as well as collectively also perhaps.
Well, God's creation lately has taken on humans as a partner, where we share with God the ability to create new things. all kinds of modern technology. Go back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution with the steam locomotive and so forth. Well, just even farming tools before this. The things that mankind has built are co-creating with God to make things better. Today, we have the most amazing quantum mechanical things like lasers and so forth, but we have better medical techniques, MRI, CAT scan, and so forth. All of these things, mankind has partnered with God to create and to originate new things that make us more advanced, more skilled, and more with greater understanding, and therefore more able to appreciate God and to love God. And by the way, the ability to love our neighbor, which was one day was just the farmer down the street, is now spans all mankind. People in America can love people in India and conversely. And this is something that God has taken on mankind as his assistants in co-creating things. So that's the new world we have with communications and everything else is a lot different from what was there in the ancient days, but it is all part of God's plan, God's continuing creation.
Absolutely. You also talk about heaven. Where can we find heaven? Should scientists put the Webb telescope somewhere and focus and find out heaven in the skies, or is it somewhere else? What is your understanding of heaven, Tom?
Okay. My understanding of heaven begins with the fact that I see mankind as multi-dimensional. The dimensions of space and time are not all there is. Our existence spans things like understanding, higher levels, sight, interpretation, reasoning, and so forth. Each of these is a higher level. Now, when I speak in dimensions, I do so because of my mathematical background, but another person might just speak of a greater degree of freedom. There is much more to mankind than simply space and time. So when you die, the parts of you that are made out of atoms and molecules, space and time, those go away. But your higher functions, the things that make you a true human, keep right on going. So heaven is the presence, the activity of all these things that are very highly important to being a human, but absent space and time, no more molecules and atoms. Well, what does that mean? It means that heaven isn't a place, and we've really seen that for probably a century or 2 centuries, that heaven isn't a specific place, but it also isn't a specific time. So the clock doesn't keep running. The clock isn't frozen. Time doesn't stand still. Time isn't one of the variables. Now, here we're in an area that's very hard for humans to understand, because for us in our human life, time has always been one of the variables, probably the most important variable. So to say that we have a new life, a new existence, and the higher levels is something that boggles the mind, because it isn't connected to space and time. So is it out there in space in the clouds? Well, that's an old image that people had a long time ago. And really, children still have that image because their minds are developing and they can't appreciate higher levels of existence. But the reality of it is that God can understand all these weaknesses among humans and communicate with us in a way that is relatable to humans. So we have narratives in the Bible and in other scriptures too, from other religious faiths, that try to convey what God wants to tell human beings. And human beings have to struggle to understand and learn any of these things because of our own limitations and weaknesses. But heaven is very real, and it takes place in all those higher dimensions which are accessible to the human mind, but which leave space and time, atoms and molecules behind.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tom. You are a very learned man. You talk about that mankind fails to understand that God is present to all time and so construct very deficient images of God. You
Right.
know, how should then people construct? What is the right construct or right image of, thinking God? What is the correct image of God? Has science ever tried to create any particular image of God, Tom?
Well, yeah, science has tried a number of times and in general failed. First thing we got to do is be humble. We have to recognize our own limitations. We got to understand there is this gulf between God and mankind. And to bridge that gulf, we try various things. There are all the higher levels of mankind. There's literature, there's poetry, there's philosophy, there's this and that and the other thing, all spiritual ways for mankind to try to understand and communicate with God, receive communications from God, prayer, a life spent in, or even time spent in contemplation. These things really, really matter. But somewhere in the mix of all these important things that bring us closer to God is science, because science expresses God's magnificent creation. Science is the pathway by which we can understand the brilliance and the genius, the stunning creativity that God brought to bear upon the world, the universe that we live in. So humility is the first step. And that is something that a whole lot of people have overlooked. They've tried to go too far, and they've made mistakes doing that.
Absolutely, Tom. So you talked about that, humans have now become partners in creation with God.
Yes.
Do you think we are becoming closer to God, or we are going away from God? A lot of people say we are going away from God.
Okay. Well, this is where the recent surveys or the survey variations over the last half century have made a difference. Back about 1950, it was, shall I say, fashionable. It was common among scientists to not believe in God. However, more recent surveys, as in 2015, 2020, and so forth, are finding about 70%, maybe 75, 80% even of scientists do believe in God, that medical people in particular are the ones that have made the big change from a secularism, a feeling that, the physical life is all there is, to a new understanding of this higher reality of human beings. That you talk to your typical medical doctor who has seen cures that can only be called miraculous, and says that I'm not going to be an atheist anymore. I'm not going to claim just atoms and molecules. I accept that there's a reality that God has done something that I don't understand, but I'm humble enough to, not try to wrestle with it, but accept it. This is a change that's come across human beings in the last century. And obviously, I think that's a very good change, but it is separately the case that a big fraction of people haven't caught on to that yet. The people who do understand the magnificence of God is a small percentage of the total population. And we encourage others to understand more and to appreciate God more. And I guess my avenue of that encouragement is to say, study science some more and look deeply within science, see the beauty of science, the magnificence, which is a wonderful reflection of God's creation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So is it that this new thing called spirituality, the rise in spirituality is something, which is answering both. It's a much more wider word for faith or even for science, and huge number of people are understanding God, humanity, everything else in the prism of spirituality, but it includes so many things that that borders either science, either technology, either in terms of God, spirituality, whatever it is. How do you see this new word called spirituality? It's an old word, but new ways of understanding it.
This is a question that is really best left to the people who are spiritual, which are our religious leaders and so forth. And as a scientist, I've got to be humble and say that the contribution I can make is finite. I can say this or that about science, but to say this or that about anything religion, I've got to spend time studying the scriptures, studying the great men and women of our history. One area that is certainly clear to you, I'm sure, is Mother Teresa in India, who was such a contributor to the happiness of the most squalid people. I mean, she brought people out of just terrible misery and gave them a glimpse of God. And for me to say that she did this or that would be very foolish, because I'm a scientist and I'm not there in the milieu that she was in. But this kind of person rises so far above the level of just the human body. She exists on such a much higher plane that we ordinary humble scientists can only stand in awe of this and say, this is God's creation at a higher level than me, the scientist, but it's a level that everyone ought to aspire to, difficult as it may be. And Mother Teresa is a good example, but there are many other examples that have spanned the ages of time. Again, speaking of India, I think of Mahatma Gandhi a century ago. I think he did get started around 1925. And the dedication the man had, his understanding of the magnificence of the human spirit and the resilience of the human spirit was just stunning. He was so far ahead of everybody else. And look what he accomplished in bringing freedom to India. Then keep going. I was on a vacation in the Serengeti in May of this year. And in Tanzania, I learned about Julius Nyerere. Well, he's revered on the level of George Washington in America. Julius Nyerere took 168 warring tribes that fought against each other in that part of Africa and brought them together in unity and built a nation out of them, Tanzania. Incredible accomplishment. Well, let's go back a few centuries. We in the Christian tradition mention great spiritual people such as St. Teresa of Avila. You go back some more, great thinkers, St. Thomas Aquinas. Go back way, way back, and we find about the year 400, St. Augustine of Hippo, a bishop in Carthage on the north shore of Africa. He was the one who said, God created space and time together. So when I say it, I'm just reciting something that's 1,600 years old. But that knowledge by St. Augustine was lost for 1,500 years until Einstein came along with general relativity. So this knowledge that is there and this examples of people who have done so well in the spiritual domain is right there for us to learn from. And those who spend their time on video games and television aren't learning any of that. And that's a failing of humans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tom, there is so much to learn about all this from you and from your book. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more about you, about your journey, about your book, what is the best way for them to do so?
Okay, the book is mostly sold through Amazon. Amazon/books, and you put in the word every when and put in my name too, Sheahen, and it'll come up right away. It is printed in printing presses all over the world. And I might mention that it's been translated into 20 languages too. So for the non-English reader, it's accessible in French, Spanish, Chinese, etc. So Amazon is the way to go. It is possible to order the book directly from the publisher, but outside of America, that would be a very long wait for it to actually make the trip across the ocean and all that. So Amazon's the way to go. And if you were to buy a copy in India, it'd probably be printed by a printing press in Delhi or something.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's set up on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.